Now let's look at the bones of the visceral cranium. And visceral cranium refers to, or this part over here refers to the base. Okay, so we're looking at the bones that make up the base. So before we looked at the bones that makes up the neurocranium, or the bones surrounding the brain, now we're looking at the bones surrounding the base. There are 14 of them. We'll start with the mandible. So mandible is the bottom one. So think of D for down and D for mandible, whereas maxilla, which is the one on top, is max. So max is like, when I think of max, I think of the highest, I think of the top. Okay, so max, maxilla at the top, mandible is the bottom. So they said there's only one mandible. There's one vomer bone or vomer bone, which is hard to see over here. This over here is the vomer bone. Okay, it's like a nasal septum. The nasal bone is over here. So we have one nasal bone here, another nasal bone over here. So it is paired. There's two nasal bones. One, two. There's the lacrimal bone. Now lacrimal bone. So lacrimal, when we cry, okay, so when tears are rolling down our face, the tears are called lacrimal fluid, and they come from the inner, like from the inside of the eye. So it comes out near the lacrimal bone. The lacrimal bone is to the side of the eye. Zygomatic bone. Zygomatic is your cheekbone over here. Inferior nasal conchae, which is paired. So again, zygomatic is paired because you see 1, 2, zygomatic bone. Lacrimal bone is paired because you see 1, 2. Inferior nasal conchae is also paired. And if you look carefully here, conchae is kind of like a curved shape over here. Okay, and that curved shape that you see is known as the inferior nasal conchae. And you see 1, 2, so it is paired. We have the palatine bone, which I'll show you in a different slide, and we have the maxilla, which is this over here. So let's look at that again. So mandible. Mandible is the bottom. See those holes? Those holes are known as foramen. If you said foramen, you're correct. There's the vomer, which is this line over here. We have the nasal bone. So we see this over here. It's a nasal bone. Now here it looks like one bone, but it's actually paired. There's one half here and one half here. So that's the nasal bone. We have the lacrimal bone, which isn't as pronounced over here. Let's see if I can find it in the other one. So lacrimal bone. Do you see that tiny bone right over here? That is your lacrimal bone. So we have one on that side and one on this side. That's your lacrimal bone. Zygomatic, that's your cheekbone. Inferior nasal conchae. I'm trying to see if we can see it here, but a little bit hard to see. But yeah, here we go. Okay, you see this curve over here? That's one inferior nasal conchae. And if I can show you the other one, and the other curve is right over here, that's the other inferior nasal conchae. And then the palatine bone, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. So the palatine bone is on where your palate is. So this over here is your palatine bone. Okay, so it's basically where the top teeth are. That part is your palatine bone. And then we have the maxilla. So if I turn this around, this part, the top part of your mouth is your maxilla. And that is paired because you can see one section is over here and the other section is over here. So 2, right? So it's paired. Okay, good. Let's review quickly. Mandible, vomer, which is like the line kind of going down like that in the nose or nasal area. The nasal bone, which is paired, 1 and 2, nasal bone. We have lacrimal bone, which is that tiny one here where you cry, right? Lacrimal bones, and there's 1 and 2, so 2. Zygomatic bone, 1, 2, so it's paired. Inferior nasal conchae, which is like that curve over here, so 1 and 2, that curve there, so 2 inferior nasal conchae, so it's paired. We have the palatine bone, which if I turn it around, right here, that's your palate, and we have the, and so again, sorry, palatine bone is also paired. So if you look at it, you can see, you can see that there's one palatine bone here, and another palatine bone here, and then it gets fused together. And then maxilla is also paired. 1, 2. So the only thing that is not paired is your mandible, because it's one whole mandible, one whole bone, and the vomer, just a line running through here, because there's just one line running through. Everything else that we looked that makes up the facial bones is paired.